My father-in-law locked me in his office during my engagement party and stuffed a check down my dress. "You're going to be mine, not my son's. This money is just the beginning," he said, laughing. What I did with that piece of paper destroyed his life forever. Oh, my dear ones, my loves, how wonderful it is to have you here with me today. Come on in, come closer, because this grandma's heart is warm just knowing you came to keep me company. Look, I know the world is busy, everyone's always in a hurry, but you took time out of your day to sit here and listen to this old lady's story. That's priceless, you know? Let me introduce myself properly. My name is Lucy Helen Ferris, but you can just call me Grandma Lucy. That's how folks around the neighborhood know me. I'm 78 years old. I celebrated my birthday last month, November 15th. I was born in Asheville, a tiny little town in North Carolina, close to the Tennessee border, you know? But today, I live here in Hendersonville, and I've been here for over 50 years now. This town is my home, my everything. And you know what this grandma does every single day, honey? I wake up at 4:30 in the morning, that's right, 4:30, to make bread. Homemade bread, warm, fragrant, the kind where you break it open and that delicious steam comes out. I make white bread, sweet bread, biscuits. Oh, the biscuits, don't even get me started. People around here know. At 7 a.m., Grandma Lucy's house has that smell of fresh bread coming from the oven, and the gate is open for anyone who wants to buy. Look, I started this bread-making business by accident, you know? About 15 years ago, I had just retired from sewing. I did alterations for years, and I felt kind of lost, not knowing what to do with so much free time. My Richard, my husband, he had also stopped working, and there we were, just the two of us, staring at each other. Then one day I made some bread just for us, but so many came out that I said, "Richard, I'm going to take some to Mrs. Carmen, the neighbor." Carmen tried it, thought it was delicious, and the next day she showed up with $5 in her hand, wanting to buy more. That's when the light bulb went on in my head, you know? I started slowly. Made about 20 loaves, sold to folks nearby. Then it grew and grew, and today I make about 80 loaves a day. It's not to get rich, honey, we earn very little, but it's enough to buy treats for the grandkids, pay the electric bill, those little things. And best of all, it keeps me busy, makes me feel useful still. Because you see, sitting at home watching TV all day isn't for me. I need something to do, or I'll go crazy. My kitchen here is tiny, but it's organized my way. I have my bowls all lined up on the shelf, the yeast packets always in the same place, the flour in that cupboard in the corner. Richard always says I could make bread with my eyes closed. I know every corner of this kitchen so well. And it's true. Sometimes I wake up still half asleep, but when I start kneading that dough, feeling it getting soft in my hands, I wake right up. And you, my dear friends watching me now, tell me in the comments, from which corner of America are you watching me? And what time of day did you come across this video? Was it in the morning, having your coffee and eating bread like mine? Was it at lunchtime, taking a break? Or is it already late afternoon, when the sun is setting and you're taking time to relax? I read all the comments, honey, all of them. And I'm so happy to know where you live and what times you take to listen to this. Grandma's stories. Let's create a chain of love? Tell me. Oh, and if you like what you're going to hear today, and I know you will, help me by hitting that like button down there. And subscribe to Grandparents' Tales too. There are more stories coming. Hit the bell so you don't miss anything. I promise that every story I tell here is true, from my own life. I don't make anything up, honey. Now let me make some fresh coffee here and sit properly in this chair, because the story I'm going to tell today, oh my Lord, it's a story I've carried inside my chest for many years. It's about a man who tried to buy me, humiliate me, turn me into something I never was. But it's also about how I turned the tables and showed him, and the whole world, that a poor woman is not a woman for sale. Prepare your heart, because today Grandma here is going to open the memory chest and tell everything, every detail, from the beginning. Look, honey, to understand exactly how everything happened, I need to go back to the beginning. Back to Asheville, the little town where I was born. Asheville is there in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, close to the Tennessee border, you know? It's a small town, but back then it was even smaller. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone knew everyone else's business too, for better and for worse. I was born in 1947, right after the war, at a time when America was still rebuilding from so much hardship. My father's name was Oscar Ferris, Mr. Oscar, as folks called him. He was a tall man, thin as a rail, with hands full of calluses from so much work. He was a porter at the Asheville train station. You know what that is, honey? He stayed at the station, waiting for trains to arrive, and helped load and unload suitcases, bags of mail, boxes of merchandise. He was paid per load carried, didn't have a fixed salary. Sometimes he'd come home with decent money. Other times he'd return with almost nothing, depending on how many trains stopped at the station that day. My mother, Evelyn May Ferris, was a washerwoman. She washed clothes for others, for folks who had more means. She'd wake up before sunrise, go get water from the creek, because we didn't have running water at home, and spend the whole day scrubbing clothes on those wooden washboards with that lye soap she made herself. Her hands were red, cracked, but she never complained. Never. She'd sing while washing, you know? She sang those old hymns, church songs, and the sound of her voice echoed through the yard. We lived in a little shotgun house in the colored section of town, a very humble neighborhood. The house had only 3 rooms, 1 bedroom where everyone slept together, me, my 3 siblings, my father and my mother, a small living room that served multiple purposes, and the kitchen with a wood-burning stove. The floor was dirt, just packed earth. We didn't have an indoor bathroom. It was an outhouse in the back of the yard, very simple. To bathe, Mama would heat water in a big tin on the stove, and we'd wash in an aluminum tub. In winter, oh Lord, that cold water. But we didn't complain, because that's how it was for everyone in the neighborhood. I was the second child. The oldest was Gerald, who was 2 years older than me. Then came me, Lucy. Then came Hortense, 3 years younger, and the baby was Arliss, who was born when I was already 8 years old. 4 mouths to feed, honey. And back then there was no government assistance, no welfare, nothing. Either you worked and ate, or you didn't eat. It was that simple. From a very young age, I helped Mama. At 5, 6 years old, I was already taking care of my younger siblings while she went to wash clothes at the creek. I stayed there, feeding Hortense, changing Arliss's cloth diapers when he soiled them. Because back then there were no disposable diapers, it was flour sackcloth that we washed and used again. When I turned 7, I started going to school in the morning, a little public school nearby, with those desks all scratched and broken. But in the afternoon I had to work too. I went with Mama to pick up laundry from the white ladies' houses, helped carry the heavy bundles, and then helped her hang everything on the line. The food at home was always the same: rice, beans, and when we were lucky, a fried egg or a piece of fatback. Meat we ate only on Sunday, if Daddy had managed to earn extra during the week. But look, we didn't starve, you see? It was simple food, but we had it every day. Mama always found a way. She planted collard greens in the yard, some squash, sweet potatoes. We ate a lot of grits, that thick cornmeal grits with collards. And it was good. It was good because we ate together, sitting at that old wooden table, everyone talking, laughing. Our games were in the street, honey. We didn't have store-bought toys. The doll I had, my mama made from fabric scraps and buttons for eyes. But we played so many things. We played tag, hide and seek, hopscotch that we drew on the ground with pieces of brick. The boys played marbles, flew kites made of newspaper and paste. We'd run down to the creek to swim, to catch tiny fish with our hands. The water was clean back then, not as polluted as today. I had a friend, Teresa, who lived next door. We were inseparable. We'd make up games, oh Lord, made pretend food with leaves and dirt, played house under the big oak tree in her yard. We talked about what it would be like when we grew up, what pretty dresses we'd wear, what big house we'd have. Poor children's dreams, you know? We dreamed big, even with nothing. But life was hard, you see, honey. Really hard. I remember seeing my daddy come home tired, his back aching from carrying so much weight. I remember my mama crying in secret when there was no money to buy medicine for Arliss, who had a fever. I remember having to miss school to help at home when Mama got sick. I remember feeling ashamed of my patched uniform, my worn-out shoes. The rich girls at school, those daughters of the mill owners, looked at us with disgust, you know? They had pretty lunch boxes, new notebooks, colored pencils. We brought a piece of cornbread with lard wrapped in newspaper and shared a pencil with a classmate. That's how I grew up, honey. I grew up watching my daddy break his back and my mama destroy her hands to put food on the table. I grew up understanding from an early age that poor folks have to work twice as hard to get half of what rich folks have. But I also grew up with love, you see? With lots of love. Because even with all the hardship, all the poverty, my daddy and mama never let us lack affection. We slept all cramped in that tiny room, but we slept hugging, warm, safe. When I turned 12, in 1959, things got even tighter at home. Gerald, my older brother, had gotten a job as a delivery boy at a bakery, but earned peanuts. My daddy had back problems from carrying so much weight and could do fewer and fewer odd jobs. That's when I started working for real, not just helping Mama. A white lady downtown, Mrs. Dalworth, called me to work in her house as a maid. I went Monday through Saturday from 7 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. I cleaned the house, washed dishes, ironed clothes. I earned almost nothing too, but it was money that helped a lot at home. And that's how my childhood faded away, honey. Poor girls don't have much childhood, don't have that luxury of playing, of studying late. We have to grow up fast, become adults before our time. But I hold no resentment, you see. I'm grateful because that hard life taught me to be strong, taught me the value of things, taught me that we don't need much to be happy. We need dignity, respect, love, and that, thank God, never lacked in our home. The years passed, honey, and I grew up in that heavy routine of working and helping at home. From 12 to 19, I worked at Mrs. Dalworth's house, cleaning, cooking, washing clothes. It was honest work, but exhausting. I'd wake up at 5 in the morning, walk half an hour to her house, and only come back when the sun was already setting. The money I earned I gave all to my mama, who used it to buy food, medicine for my daddy, who had more and more back problems. When I turned 19 in 1966, something happened that changed my life. My brother Gerald had gotten a job at a textile mill in Charlotte. He went there in January, and in March he sent a letter saying there was more work there, that the city was bigger, that I could find something better. My mama didn't want to let me go, but my daddy said, "Evelyn, the girl needs a chance better than ours. Let her try." That's how, in April 1966, with a cardboard suitcase in my hand and a tight heart, I got on that Greyhound bus in Asheville heading to Charlotte. I had never left my little town, honey. Never. I cried so much on that trip, looking out the window, watching my hometown fade behind. But at the same time, there was hope in my chest, you know? A desire to make it, to achieve something in life. I arrived in Charlotte on a cold spring afternoon. Gerald picked me up at the bus station and took me to a boarding house downtown near Independence Square. It was a tiny little room that I shared with 2 other girls who also worked as maids. The landlady, Mrs. Quincy, was a plump, kind lady who charged cheap, $20 a month with breakfast included. Right in the first week, Gerald got me work. In the morning, from 7 to noon, I worked at a family's house, cleaning and tidying. In the afternoon, from 2 to 7, I worked at a diner on Tryon Street, washing dishes and helping in the kitchen. 2 jobs, honey. I worked like crazy, but at least the money was better than in Asheville. I could send some money to my daddy and mama every month and still had a little left to buy a nice soap, a comb, those girly things. And it was at that diner that I met Richard. Look, I'm going to tell you exactly how it was, because to this day I remember every detail of that day. It was a Tuesday, end of May 1967. I was still 19, turning 20 in November. It was a cold day, one of those days with fine drizzle that wets you slowly. The diner was empty, just a customer here and there. I was in the back, in the kitchen, washing a pile of dishes, when I heard the front door open and the bell go ding-ding. I peeked through the window that looked into the customer area and saw a tall young man with neatly combed hair walk in, carrying a leather briefcase under his arm. He wore a suit and tie, something we didn't see much in that humble diner. He sat at the counter and ordered coffee from Mr. Waldman, the owner. "Miss," he called me, and I almost dropped a dish in shock. "Could you bring me a glass of water, please?" I dried my hands on my apron and brought the water. When I placed the glass in front of him, our eyes met. Oh my Lord, what blue eyes that young man had, blue like the Carolina sky after rain. He smiled at me, a shy kind of smile, and said, "Thank you, miss. What's your name?" "Lucy, sir," I answered, lowering my eyes because I got really embarrassed. "Lucy," he repeated, as if storing my name in his memory. "What a beautiful name. I'm Richard Albert Alden." That's where it started, honey. Richard started coming to the diner every day. He worked at a law office nearby. He was finishing law school. And every day, mid-afternoon, he'd show up for coffee. And every day he'd strike up a conversation with me. He'd ask where I was from, how long I'd been in Charlotte, if I liked the city. I'd answer kind of shyly, afraid Mr. Waldman would yell at me for chatting during work hours, but Richard was so kind, so polite, that even Mr. Waldman found it amusing. After about 2 months like this, on a Saturday in July, Richard waited for me at the diner door when I got off work. He was nervous, running his hand through his hair, and when he saw me, he came running. "Lucy, I know this might seem forward of me, but would you accept going to get ice cream with me on Sunday?" I turned red as a beet. No boy had ever asked me out, honey. Never. I didn't even know what to answer, but I ended up saying yes, with my voice all shaky. And that's how we started dating. Richard was a wonderful young man, you see. Caring, respectful, a gentleman. He treated me like I was a princess, even though I was a domestic worker and he was the son of wealthy people. Because yes, his family had money. His father, Dr. Albert Augustus Alden, was a doctor, one of the most respected doctors in Charlotte. He had a large clinic downtown, treated important people from Atlanta who came here for business. Richard's mother, Mrs. Eulalie, was a retired teacher, an elegant lady who always dressed nicely. When Richard told me about his family, I got scared, you know. I thought, my Lord, this boy is from another class. What does he want with me? But he always said, "Lucy, I don't care about that. I like you just the way you are. You're hardworking, honest, have a good heart. That's what matters." We dated in secret for almost 6 months. Richard was afraid to tell his parents. He said his father was very demanding, very strict, would make a scene. But in January 1968, he gathered courage and took me to meet the family. Oh my Lord, that day I'll never forget. I was nervous as could be. I had bought a navy blue dress with the money I saved for months. It was the nicest dress I had, and put my hair in a neat bun. Richard picked me up at the boarding house in his car, a beige Volkswagen Beetle, and took me to the family home, which was in a wealthy neighborhood near Freedom Park. The house was beautiful, honey. So beautiful. It was a large house, 2 stories, with a front garden full of roses and hydrangeas. It had a porch with white columns, huge windows with lace curtains. I looked at all that, and my heart almost jumped out. My God, I don't belong in this place, I thought. Richard rang the doorbell, and a maid opened the door, a girl in a black uniform and white apron. She took us to the living room, where Dr. Albert and Mrs. Eulalie were sitting on the sofa, waiting. "Good afternoon," I said, doing a small curtsy, trying to be polite. Mrs. Eulalie gave a forced smile and replied, "Good afternoon, dear." But Dr. Albert didn't even smile. He looked me up and down with those cold gray eyes, as if he were evaluating merchandise. He was a large, strong man, with a graying mustache and hair slicked back with pomade. He wore a gray suit even though he was at home and had a thick gold chain on his wrist. "So you're this Lucy," he said, his voice deep as thunder. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. And it didn't sound like a greeting, it sounded like an accusation. "Yes, sir," I replied, my voice almost disappearing. "Where are you from?" "Asheville, sir." "And what do your parents do?" I swallowed hard. My father was a porter at the train station, but today he doesn't work anymore due to health problems. My mother was a washerwoman. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Mrs. Eulalie cleared her throat, embarrassed. "Doctor." Albert raised an eyebrow and looked at Richard with an expression that said everything. "You brought this girl here?" "Father, mother," Richard said, his voice firm, but I could tell he was nervous. "Lucy and I have been dating for 6 months. She's a wonderful girl, hard-working, honest. I really like her and wanted you to meet her." Dr. Albert got up from the sofa. He was even taller and more intimidating standing. He approached me, so close I could smell his expensive cologne. He looked me in the eyes and said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "Richard has always been very sensitive, very idealistic. But one thing is being idealistic. Another is being foolish. Anyway, welcome, Lucy. Let's see what time has in store for us." The visit was horrible, honey. Horrible. Mrs. Eulalie tried to be polite, served tea, asked questions about Charlotte, but everything seemed fake. Dr. Albert barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was always with that tone of superiority, as if I were inferior. When it was time to leave, at the door, he put his hand on Richard's shoulder and said loud enough for me to hear, "My son, you're still young. You have a lot to learn about life, about appropriate choices." I left that house wanting to cry. In the car, Richard apologized 1,000 times, said his father was always like that with everyone, that I shouldn't mind. But how could I not mind, honey? I had been humiliated, despised, treated as if I had no value at all. But the worst was yet to come. Despite that difficult first visit, Richard didn't give up on me. He stayed firm, saying his love was bigger than any prejudice. And I, silly girl in love that I was, believed that love would be enough. Oh, honey, how naive we are when we're young. We continued dating throughout 1968. Richard graduated from law school in December that year, and right after, in January 1969, he proposed to me. It was on a Sunday afternoon at Independence Square. He knelt in front of everyone, opened a little box with a ring. It wasn't gold, it was a simple silver band, because Richard didn't have much money yet, and asked, "Lucy Helen Ferris, will you marry me?" I said yes, with tears streaming down my face. I loved that man, honey. I really loved him with all the strength of my 21-year-old heart. When we told his parents, the reaction was cold. Dr. Albert was silent for what seemed like an eternity. Then he said, with that deep voice, "If that's what you want, my son, then so be it. But I'm going to insist on throwing an engagement party worthy of the Alden family name. I don't want people saying my son is getting married in secret, as if he were ashamed." At the time, I thought that was a gesture of acceptance, you know? I thought he was trying to make peace, include me in the family. Richard was happy too, said it was a sign that his father was accepting our relationship. How wrong we were, my God. How blind we were. The party was set for Saturday, March 15th, 1969. Dr. Albert insisted it be at the family mansion, that he would take care of everything himself, decorations, food, drinks, invitations. "Don't you worry about anything," he'd say, with that smile I couldn't tell if it was sincere or fake. Richard was thrilled. I was nervous. The week before the party, I could barely sleep. I'd toss and turn in the boarding house bed, wondering if everything would be okay, if people would accept me, if I could avoid embarrassing myself among so many important people. Because according to Richard, his father had invited over 100 people, doctors, lawyers, politicians, businessmen from Charlotte, people I'd never seen in my life, people from a completely different world than mine. The day of the party came. I had bought a new dress, spent almost all the money I'd saved, a peach-colored dress with a full skirt down to my knees that the saleswoman at the store said was the latest fashion. I styled my hair in an updo I saw in a magazine, put on light pink lipstick. When I looked in the mirror, I thought, can I look like I belong in this place? Richard picked me up at 7 in the evening. When we arrived at the mansion, I almost fainted. The house was transformed, honey. There were colored lights decorating the entire garden, Japanese lanterns hanging from the trees, a huge white tent set up in the outdoor area where the tables were. There was a long table just for sweets, brownies, petit fours, truffles, pralines, and another table just for appetizers. There was even a waiter in uniform serving champagne in crystal glasses. People started arriving, women in expensive dresses, jewelry sparkling on their necks and ears, hair done at salons, men in dark suits, smelling of imported cologne, talking about business and politics. I felt like a fish out of water, honey. I felt tiny, insignificant, like at any moment someone would point at me and say, "What is this poor girl doing here?" But Richard stayed by my side all night, introducing me to everyone, saying with pride, "This is Lucy, my fiancée." Some looked at me with curiosity, others with a smirk, but most were polite, at least in front of Richard. Around 9:30 at night, when the party was in full swing, with music playing and people laughing and talking loudly because of the drinks, Dr. Albert appeared beside me. He was elegant in a navy blue suit, with a silk handkerchief in his pocket, smelling of that strong, expensive cologne. He put his hand on my shoulder, a heavy hand that made me feel a bad shiver, and said very quietly, almost in my ear, "Lucy, I need you to come with me to my office. I have a special gift for you, a gift that I want to give you in private." The way he said it, honey, it wasn't an invitation, it was an order. And there was something in that tone of voice that scared me, but I couldn't refuse, right? It was my fiancé's father, it was his house, it was the party he had paid for. So I said, "Yes, sir," and followed him. We crossed the room full of people, went through the side hallway, and he took me to his office, a huge room with bookshelves from floor to ceiling, a dark, heavy wooden desk, leather armchairs, thick carpet on the floor. As soon as we entered, he closed the door, and I heard the sound of the key turning in the lock. My heart raced. "Dr. Albert," I said, my voice shaking, "what do you want to give me?" He didn't answer right away. He went to the bar in the corner of the room, poured himself a glass of whiskey, took a sip, and only then turned to me. The way he looked at me, my lord, I'll never forget that look. It was no longer the cold, superior look from before. It was a look that undressed me, that made me feel dirty, vulnerable, afraid. "You know, Lucy," he began, walking slowly toward me, "since the first time you entered this house, I noticed something. You're too beautiful for a failure like my son." I took a step back. "Excuse me?" He laughed, a low, bitter laugh. "Richard is weak, always has been, doesn't have the fiber I have, doesn't have the power, the money, the presence I have." He took another step. I took another back until my back hit the bookshelf. "You deserve something better. You deserve a real man." What happened in those next few minutes, honey, I don't like to remember. I don't even like to put into words. But I need to tell because you need to understand the magnitude of the humiliation, the disgust, the pain I felt. He cornered me there against that bookshelf. The smell of whiskey on his breath mixed with that sickening cologne. The words he said, words no man should say to a decent girl, to his own son's fiancée. He said I wasn't going to be Richard's wife. Said I was going to be something else, something dirty, hidden, shameful. Said the marriage would just be for show, but my body would be his whenever he wanted. I tried to leave, tried to push him away, but he was big, too strong. He grabbed me by the arm, grabbed so hard it left a purple bruise later, and whispered in my ear, "Either you accept, or I cut off all of Richard's allowance. You'll live in the slums. You'll starve. You want that?" I was trembling, crying, begging him to let me go. And then he released my arm, went to his desk, got a checkbook, and started writing. The pen scratched the paper with that sound that echoed in the heavy silence of the room. When he finished, he tore off the check and walked back to me. "This here," he said, waving the paper in my face, "is an advance. It's enough to buy your parents' house 10 times over. It's your price, Lucy. The price of your body, your obedience, your silence." And then, with a smile that made me feel like the dirtiest creature in the world, he stuffed that check inside the neckline of my dress. The paper brushed against my skin, and I felt like something was burning, something filthy contaminating me. "Think about it fondly," he said, unlocking the door. "And remember, if you tell Richard, I'll deny everything." And who do you think he'll believe? The little maid who came from the mountains, or his father? He opened the door and left, leaving me there alone, leaning against that bookshelf, trembling, with that cursed paper burning inside my dress. I don't know how long I stayed there. Could have been seconds, could have been minutes. I just remember finally being able to walk, leaving that room, and going straight to the bathroom. I locked the door, looked in the mirror, and didn't recognize the girl I saw there. Red eyes, face stained with tears, smudged lipstick. I took that check out of my dress with disgust, like it was a poisonous animal, and stuffed it in the little purse I had brought. I washed my face, tried to compose myself. But inside, honey, inside, I was destroyed. I was broken into 1,000 pieces. When I went back to the party, Richard came running. "Honey, where were you? I was looking for you." I forced a smile. I was in the bathroom. I felt sick. I think I ate something that didn't agree with me. He was worried, wanted to take me home, but I said I was better. Lie, I wasn't better. I would never be the same after that night. The days following that party were the darkest of my life, honey. I went back to the boarding house that night and couldn't sleep. I stayed staring at the ceiling, listening to the other girls snoring, feeling that cursed check burning inside my purse like it was a live coal. I thought, if I tear it up, it's all over. If I return it, he'll get angry. If I accept... No, I couldn't accept. But what did I do then? The hours passed slowly, dragging. When Mrs. Quincy's clock struck 5 in the morning, I was still awake, my eyes burning from being open so long, my body aching from being so tense. I got up like a ghost, got ready mechanically, and went to work. But it wasn't me living that life anymore. It was an empty body, a shell walking through the streets of Charlotte. The following Sunday, Richard showed up at the boarding house all smiles, wanting to know how I thought the party was. I forced a smile and said it had been wonderful. He talked about plans for the wedding, about the small house he was trying to rent for us to live in, about how happy we'd be. And every word of his was a stab in my chest, because I knew there was a terrible secret between us, a secret that could destroy everything. He held my hand. "Lucy, are you okay? Your hand is ice cold." "I'm fine, honey. It's just the cold." Lie. It was fear freezing me from the inside. I wanted to tell. God knows how much I wanted to. Open my mouth and let it all out, the locked office, the disgusting words, the heavy hands, the check stuffed in my dress. But every time I was about to open my mouth, I heard Dr. Albert's voice echoing in my head. "Who do you think he'll believe? The little maid who came from the mountains, or his father?" I spent the whole week like a zombie. I went to work at the house in the morning, but broke 3 plates because my hands were shaking. The lady looked at me angrily. Lucy, those plates are expensive. If you break another one, I'm taking it out of your pay. I apologized, head down, tears wanting to escape, but I held them back. In the afternoon, at the diner, it was even worse. Mr. Waldman called me out twice because I forgot customer orders, confused change, dropped an entire tray of glasses. Girl, what's going on with you? You crazy? At night, at the boarding house, I couldn't even eat. I'd sit at the dining table, look at the plate of food Mrs. Quincy had prepared, rice, beans, a piece of meat, and my stomach would turn. The other girls would talk, laugh, gossip about the day, but I didn't hear anything. It was like I was underwater, everything muffled, distant, unreal. Mrs. Quincy got worried. One night, she sat next to me and put her hand on my shoulder. Girl, what's happening to you? Are you sick? Heart trouble? Did you fight with your fiancé? No, Mrs. Quincy. Just tired. Lie. It was despair. It was a deep, dark pit that was swallowing me slowly, and I couldn't find a rope to pull myself out. I thought about writing a letter to my mama telling her everything. I got paper and pen, sat on the bed, and started. Mama, I need to tell you something. But I couldn't continue. How was I going to tell my mama, who lived far away, who couldn't do anything, who would just suffer with me? I crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. On Thursday of that week, I was at the diner when the door opened and Dr. Albert walked in. My blood froze. The noise of the diner, customer conversation, plates clanging, coffee machine hissing, everything disappeared. There was only him, walking toward the counter, that predator's smile on his face. He had never been to that diner before. Never. It was too humble a place for a man like him. But there he was, sitting at the counter, ordering coffee as if it were the most natural thing in the world. When Mr. Waldman went to the kitchen to get something, Dr. Albert leaned toward me. The smell of that expensive cologne invaded my nostrils, made me nauseous. So, Lucy, he whispered, his voice low, intimate, disgusting. Have you thought about my proposal, or do you need more incentive? I couldn't answer. My throat had closed. My heart was beating so hard I thought it would come out of my mouth. He smiled, that cold, cruel smile, and continued. You know, I can make your lives very difficult. Very difficult indeed. I can make sure no law office in Charlotte hires Richard. I can make sure you can't rent any house in this city. You know I have important friends, don't you? The mayor has dinner at my house every week. The police chief owes me favors. You really think anyone will believe a maid's word against mine? He drank the coffee in one gulp, placed the coins on the counter forcefully, the metal clinking loudly, and left. It was a threat, clear, direct, frightening, and effective, because it left me paralyzed with fear. When he left, I ran to the diner bathroom and threw up. I threw up everything in my stomach, which was almost nothing because I'd barely eaten in the last few days, and then stayed there, kneeling on the cold floor of that dirty bathroom, crying like a lost child, crying like my mama cried in secret when the money didn't last the month, crying like I had cried when I left Asheville. That night, I thought about running away. I thought about grabbing my things, which weren't many, fit in a small suitcase, and disappearing from Charlotte, going back to Asheville, hugging my mama and never leaving her side. But then I remembered. What about Richard? I loved him, honey. I really loved him. How was I going to abandon him without even explaining why? And if I told the truth and he didn't believe me, I would lose him anyway. But on top of that, I would carry the shame of being called a liar, crazy, a woman who makes up stories for attention. I was trapped like a bird in a cage, with no way out, no air to breathe, beating my wings against the bars until they hurt. On Saturday, March 22nd, exactly 1 week after the party, the last straw happened. I was walking back to the boarding house after work, already at dusk, when a car stopped beside me. It was Richard's beige Beetle. But the one driving wasn't him. It was Dr. Albert. Get in the car, Lucy. I need to talk to you." My heart raced. The street was almost empty. There was just an old man walking far away and a woman sweeping the sidewalk across the street. I looked around, searching for help, but there was no one nearby. "No, sir. I need to go home." He got out of the car. The door slammed hard. He came walking toward me, slowly, like a cat playing with the mouse before killing it. The street was getting dark, the streetlights starting to turn on one by one. And at that moment, I felt more fear than I had felt in my entire life. He got close. So close I could see the veins bulging in his neck, the barely contained rage in his eyes, the clenched jaw. "You think you can defy me?" he said, his voice low but full of venom, real threat. "You think you're that special? Listen here, you poor girl. You're not the first and you won't be the last. I always get what I want. Always. And nobody, you hear me? Nobody tells me no." And then he did something that terrified me, chilled me to the bone. He opened his hand, showed a manila envelope and said, "Inside here are photos of you. Photos I had a private investigator take. You entering that shabby boarding house, you working at that fifth-rate diner, you in those cheap clothes walking down the street. If you don't accept my proposal, I'm going to spread all over the city that you're a gold digger, an opportunist who just wants the family's money. I'm going to show these photos to everyone. I'm going to make up stories about you, I'm going to destroy your reputation, and then I'm going to destroy Richard too, cutting off everything he has. He'll be penniless. And it will be your fault." I felt my legs weaken. He had investigated me. He had followed me. He had taken pictures of me without me knowing, as if I were a criminal, as if I were something dirty that needed to be documented. I felt violated, exposed, completely powerless. I felt like a cornered animal, with no way out, waiting for the final blow. He got in the car, started the engine, and drove off, accelerating hard, leaving a cloud of dust and that smell of exhaust. I stood there in the middle of the street, trembling, wanting to scream, but unable to make any sound. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I wanted to cry, but no more tears came out, as if I had dried up inside. When I finally got to the boarding house, I locked the room door with that old key, threw my purse on the floor, and threw myself on the bed. And it was there, on that horrible night, that I reached my lowest point. The pit had a bottom, and I had reached it. I started to consider accepting. I thought, rationalized, convinced myself that maybe it's better this way. Maybe I'll marry Richard, pretend everything is okay, and accept being that disgusting man's toy. At least Richard will have a good life, won't suffer, won't lose everything. I sacrifice myself, but he stays happy. Isn't that what love means? Sacrifice? I was willing to sacrifice myself, honey. To destroy myself inside, to protect the man I loved. But was that really love? Or was it cowardice? Or was it just the desperation of a 21-year-old girl who didn't see another way out? I stayed up all night, in unbearable mental torture. My head spinning, spinning, spinning. Did I have the courage to report him? To whom? The police? Would they believe me against a wealthy, respected doctor, friend of the police chief? Richard? What if he sided with his father? What if he called me crazy, a liar, a woman seeking attention? When the sun rose on Sunday, I was exhausted, empty, broken into 1,000 pieces. I looked in the cracked mirror on the room wall and didn't recognize the girl I saw there. Sunken eyes, with purple circles underneath, pale face, colorless lips. The expression of someone who had already given up on everything, who had already accepted defeat. But then, in that moment of complete despair, when I was ready to raise the white flag and surrender, something unexpected happened. I remembered something my mama always said back in Asheville, when life got tight, when money ran out, when it seemed like there was no way out. My daughter, there comes a time when you have to choose between bowing down or standing up. And strong women don't bow to any man, no matter how much power he has. Could be a boss, could be a doctor, could be a king. Nobody has the right to make us doormats. My mama, Evelyn May, that woman who washed clothes until her hands were raw to feed her children. That woman who woke up before the sun and slept after the moon. That woman who never complained, never gave up, never bent, even when life pushed her down. What would she think of me if she knew I was about to sell myself, surrender myself, become a man's property? And in that moment, honey, something changed inside me. It wasn't a big change. It wasn't an explosion of courage. It wasn't a magical transformation. It was just a tiny spark, almost going out, but it was a spark of anger, of indignation, of refusal to accept that fate. I grabbed my purse, took that check out of it, that piece of paper that had haunted me for a whole week, and looked at it. And for the first time since the party, I didn't feel fear. I felt anger. Anger at a man who thought he could buy people like buying a pound of meat at the butcher. Anger at a system that protected men like him and crushed women like me. And that's when the idea came. A crazy, dangerous idea that could go terribly wrong. But it was the only weapon I had. If that man had used power and money against me, I was going to use the only thing he couldn't control. The truth exposed in public. Shame, scandal, sunlight entering the dark place where he did his dirty deeds. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to bow down. I wasn't going to accept. I was going to fight, even if it cost everything I had, even if it meant losing Richard, even if it meant becoming the target of that powerful man's anger. Because some things are more important than safety. Some things are more important than comfort. And dignity is one of them. For the first time in a week, I could breathe deeply. The fear was still there, enormous, suffocating, heavy as a stone in my chest. But along with it, now there was something more. There was hope. And there was a plan starting to form in my head. A plan that involved that engagement party, those important guests, that stage where Dr. Albert was going to make his speech as proud father. If he wanted to use me, I was going to use him too. If he wanted to expose me, I was going to expose him first. And this time, it would be in front of everyone. 2 weeks after that confrontation on the street, I received an invitation. It was a beautiful card, printed on thick cream paper with gold lettering. It said, Dr. Albert Augustus Alden and Mrs. Eulalie Alden have the pleasure of inviting you to a reception dinner in honor of the engagement of their son Richard Albert Alden to Miss Lucy Helen Ferris, April 12, 1969, at 8 p.m. at the family residence. Richard showed me the invitation, all excited. Honey, my father wants to throw a more intimate dinner, just with the most important people in Charlotte society. He said the previous party was too big, too chaotic, and he wants something more elegant for you to get to know people better. I looked at that invitation and knew. I knew this was another move by Dr. Albert. He thought I had surrendered, that I had agreed to stay quiet in my corner. He wanted to show me off like a trophy, present me to society as the humble daughter-in-law he had generously accepted. But he didn't know I had other plans. In the days leading up to the dinner, I prepared. I didn't buy a new dress. I had no money and didn't want to spend on that. I used the same peach-colored dress from the other party. But I rehearsed. I rehearsed in the mirror, in the boarding house room, the words I was going to say. I rehearsed until I could speak without trembling, without stuttering, without crying. And I hid that cursed check inside the bodice of my dress, well tucked away, waiting for the right moment. Mrs. Quincy noticed something had changed in me. Girl, you're different. You have a sparkle in your eyes, but it's not the sparkle of happiness. It's a sparkle of... What? Courage, Mrs. Quincy. It's the sparkle of courage. April 12th came. A Saturday. Richard picked me up at 7:30 in the evening. On the way to the mansion, he talked non-stop about how happy he was, how he thought his father was finally accepting our relationship, how it would be a wonderful night. I just listened, my hand cold inside his, my heart beating like a war drum. When we arrived at the mansion, The scene was even more luxurious than before. Inside the house, in the huge living room, they had set up round tables with white tablecloths, candles and silver candelabras, flower arrangements that must have cost more than I earned in a month. There must have been about 50, 60 people, all dressed elegantly, all talking quietly, drinking wine in crystal glasses. And in the corner of the room, they had set up a small stage with a microphone. Dr. Albert came to greet us. He was impeccable in a black tuxedo, his hair shiny with pomade, that fake smile stuck on his face. He greeted Richard with a pat on the shoulder, and when he looked at me, I saw it. I saw in his eyes that certainty of victory, that gleam of someone who thinks they've already won the game. "Lucy, so glad you came," he said, his voice syrupy, disgusting. "You look beautiful. Come, let's introduce you to our dearest friends." And he grabbed me by the arm, forcefully, possessively, and dragged me through the room, introducing me to everyone as the future daughter-in-law. Always with that smile, always with that tone that seemed kind, but to me sounded like a threat. Dinner was served at 8:30. There was an appetizer, main course, dessert. Everything prepared by hired chefs. People ate, drank, talked about politics, business, about the new clinic, Dr. Albert was building. I could barely swallow the food. Each forkful seemed like a piece of stone going down my throat. Around 10 o'clock after dessert, Dr. Albert stood up and tapped his fork on his wine glass. The tinkling of crystal echoed through the room. Conversation ceased. Everyone looked at him. "My dear friends," he began, that deep, imposing voice, "I would like to say a few words on this very special night." He paused dramatically. "As you all know, my son Richard is about to get married, and I, as a father, could not be more proud." The word came out with some effort, as if it hurt his mouth. "Richard chose a simple girl, humble, of modest origin, and I learned that love doesn't choose social class." People applauded politely. I felt my stomach turn. "Therefore," he continued, "I want Richard to come here and make a toast to his future, to our future as a family." Richard stood up, emotional, and went to the stage. He took the microphone and started talking about how grateful he was to his father, how he loved his family, how I was the woman of his life. And it was at that moment, honey, that I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I walked. I walked between the tables, with all those people looking at me with curiosity. I climbed the 2 steps to the stage. Richard saw me and smiled, thinking I was going to compliment his speech. But when he saw my face, the smile disappeared. "Lucy, do you want to say something?" I took the microphone from his hand. My hand was shaking so much I almost dropped it. I took a deep breath. I looked at the room full of people. And then I looked straight into Dr. Albert's cold gray eyes. "Yes," I said, my voice coming out hoarse through the microphone. "I have something very important to say." Dr. Albert tensed. I saw his jaw clench. "I wanted to thank my father-in-law," I began, and my voice became firmer, "for this wonderful dinner. And for another gift he gave me a few weeks ago." Total silence in the room. At the previous engagement party, on March 15th, while all of you were outside toasting and having fun, Dr. Albert called me to his office. He said he had a special gift to give me, a private gift. Richard was looking at me without understanding. Mrs. Eulalie had dropped her fork on her plate. "He locked the office door," I continued, the words now coming out like a waterfall, impossible to stop. "And he told me I was too beautiful for his son. He said I wasn't going to be Richard's wife. He said I was going to be something else." I couldn't speak explicitly, but the tone of my voice made it clear what that something else meant. He cornered me, grabbed me hard. "Look, there's still a purple mark on my arm," and made an indecent proposal. He said the marriage would be for show, but my body would be his. Gasps of shock echoed through the room. An elderly lady put her hand to her chest, horrified. Richard had turned white as a sheet. "And to seal this Agreement, I took the check from inside my dress bodice. He wrote this, a check for an absurd amount. He said it was the price of my body, my obedience, my silence. And he stuffed it inside my dress, laughing, saying that if I didn't accept, he would destroy Richard's life and mine. I showed the check to the photographer's camera that was there documenting the dinner. I showed Richard, who read it, and his eyes filled with tears of rage. I showed Mrs. Eulalie, who turned pale. And then I turned to the entire room. Dr. Albert, here's your change. I'm not for sale. My dignity has no price. And you, who call yourself a good man, respected doctor, family man, are actually a disgusting man who tries to buy and control women. And then, very slowly, very theatrically, I tore that check. Once, twice, 3, 4 times, until it became confetti. And I threw the little pieces in his face, falling like dirty snow on top of the impeccable black tuxedo. What happened next was too fast. Richard let out a scream of pain, betrayal, rage, and jumped off the stage. He went straight to his father. And there, in front of everyone, he punched Dr. Albert in the face. A punch so hard the man fell backward, knocking over a table, glasses and plates shattering on the floor. "How dare you!" Richard was screaming, the veins in his neck bulging. "How dare you touch my fiancé! You're a monster!" Women screamed. Men stood up startled. Mrs. Eulalie started crying, sobbing loudly. "Albert, what have you done? For God's sake, what have you done?" Dr. Albert got up from the floor, his nose bleeding, the check pieces still stuck to his suit. He looked at me with so much hatred, I felt a chill down my spine. But it wasn't fear anymore. It was the certainty that I had won. People started leaving, quickly, whispering to each other, looking with disgust at Dr. Albert. In a matter of minutes, the room was almost empty, and I stayed there, on the stage, trembling, but standing and free. What happened after that night changed everything, honey. Changed it forever. The following Monday, Mrs. Eulalie filed for divorce. She had been humiliated in front of all of Charlotte's society, and she wasn't going to forgive. The divorce was contentious, took months, but in the end, she got half of everything: the house, the clinic, the savings. Dr. Albert tried to fight, but her lawyers were better. The clinic partners met and voted to remove him. They said they couldn't have a scandal like that tarnishing the business's reputation. Within 6 months, Dr. Albert had lost everything: his family, his company, his respect. The last time I heard about him, I learned he was living in a small apartment in the poor part of town, alone, bitter, taking medicine for depression. I don't feel sorry. I feel that justice was served. As for me and Richard, we started from scratch. He refused to accept anything from his father. We rented a humble little house right here in Charlotte, in the Dilworth neighborhood. 2 rooms, bathroom in the back, cramped kitchen. But it was ours, earned with our work. Richard got a job at a small law firm, earning little. I kept working, mornings at the house, afternoons at the diner. We saved every penny. We got married in August 1969, in a simple ceremony at the neighborhood church, just with my parents who came from Asheville, my brother Gerald, and 2 of Richard's friends. No party, no luxury, but with real love. The years passed. We had 3 children. Paul was born in 1971, Marina in 1974, and Rafe in 1978. We raised them with what we had: little money, but lots of affection. Richard worked his whole life as a lawyer, always honest, never accepting bribes or dirty business. I worked until 2010, when I retired from sewing. That's when I started with the bread, as I told you at the beginning, and it was the best thing I did. Today, at 78 years old, I wake up every day at 4:30 in the morning here in my kitchen. I still live in Charlotte, now in a bigger house we managed to buy in 1985, near downtown. Richard is here with me, 80 years old, retired, but still strong, thank God. We have coffee together every morning before I start making the bread. My 3 children live here in Charlotte. Paul is a math teacher, Marina works at the health clinic, and Rafe has a mechanic shop. They come here every week, always bringing the grandkids. There are 7 grandchildren in total, honey. 7, from 3 to 15 years old. The house fills with noise, laughter, running around. And I love every second. Last Sunday we had lunch here at home, that big Southern family lunch, you know? Fried chicken, collard greens, mac and cheese, cornbread, sweet potato casserole. The table full of people, everyone talking together, the grandkids playing in the yard. Richard sitting at the head of the table, smiling, happy. And I looked at all that and thought, it was worth it. Every fight, every difficulty, every tear. It was worth it. Because we built this, honey, brick by brick with our own hands, without dirty money, without favors from powerful people, without selling ourselves to anyone. With dignity. Sometimes I pass by the old Alden family mansion. Today it's a private school. Dr. Albert sold it when he needed money. And you know what I feel when I pass by there? Nothing. No anger, no resentment, no bitterness. That's part of the past. And the past is behind me. What matters is today. It's waking up and having my Richard beside me, snoring softly. It's kneading the bread dough and feeling that soft texture in my hands. It's seeing the grandkids eating warm bread with butter and asking for more. It's receiving my daughter's hug, my son's kiss, my youngest's firm handshake. It's knowing that I didn't sell myself, that I didn't bow down, that I fought and won. Life didn't get easy, no. It continued being the life of poor folks, working people. But it's an honest, clean, dignified life. And that's priceless. Look, honey, if there's someone out there watching me who's going through something similar, if there's someone being pressured, being threatened, being treated like an object that can be bought and sold, I want you to hear carefully what this grandma is going to say. You're not alone, and you don't have to accept it. I know it's scary to face powerful people. I know it seems impossible to fight against those who have money, influence, respect in society. I know you keep thinking, who will believe me? But listen, the truth always has a power that lies can't overcome. Always. When I was in that locked office, trembling with fear, I thought there was no way out. When he stuffed that check in my dress, I felt like the dirtiest creature in the world. I almost accepted. Almost sold myself because it seemed like the only way. But then I remembered who I was, daughter of Evelyn, who never bent, who washed clothes until her hands bled, but never lost her dignity. And that's what saved me. Remembering that my worth isn't in what others think of me. It's in what I know about myself. Nobody can buy me if I don't put myself up for sale. You who are out there, no matter where you are in the world, in America, in Europe, in Asia, anywhere, know that there are people and organizations ready to help. Seek out the authorities in your country. Talk to people you trust. Expose the abuse. Don't carry this alone. Silence protects the abuser, never the victim. And for you who've never been through this, but who know someone who might be going through it, open your eyes. Pay attention to the signs. That coworker who's too quiet, that neighbor who doesn't look anyone in the eye anymore, that family member who suddenly changed. Reach out. Sometimes they just need to know someone believes them. I tore that check and threw it in his face because I chose my dignity. And you can choose too. Always can. No matter how many threats they make, how much fear they try to put in you, the choice to stand up or bow down is yours. Always has been. Always will be. Today, I make bread. It's a simple life. But it's my life, earned with my hands, with my sweat, with my courage, and that's worth more than all the checks in the world. My dear ones, if this story touched your heart, if you made it here with me on this journey, I need to ask you something urgent. Subscribe to Grandparents' Tales now and hit that bell. Why? Because each subscriber is a voice saying no to those who think they can buy people. Each view is a light shining against abuse of power. And I need this message to reach every corner of this world. I need it to reach that girl being blackmailed today, that boy being humiliated today, that child who needs to know they can report it. And leave me a comment with the word dignity. Just that, dignity. So I know you watched until the end, that you understood the message, that you'll carry this in your heart. Do it now. Don't wait another minute. Because someone needs you today. Someone needs this story today. And always remember, you are never, ever for sale. On my wedding day, my own father sold me like cattle to the town priest. I already got paid, he said, locking me in that dark storage room. Before you belong to that poor nobody, you're his property. It took me 50 years to be able to tell this story. Hi, my dear ones. How are you all doing? What a joy to have you here with me once again. My name is Mary Reynolds. I'm 73 years old, and I'm here in my simple little house in Asheville, North Carolina. I was born in Boone, also here in our beautiful state, but life brought me here many years ago, and this is where I put down my roots. You know what I was doing just a little while ago, before sitting down to talk with you? I was finishing up a crochet blanket. Oh, my children, you can't imagine how crochet has become my passion. I make blankets, table runners, coasters, everything with these hands that have been through so much in life. I started doing crochet after I turned 50, can you believe it? It was my daughter-in-law, Teresa, who taught me. She saw that I was very lonely at home, the kids all grown up, and one day she showed up here with a hook and a ball of light blue yarn. "Miss Mary," she said, "you're going to learn crochet with me. You'll see how good it is to keep your hands and mind busy." At first I resisted, said I was too old to learn something new. But she insisted, and today I'm so grateful. My grandchildren love the little blankets I make for their rooms. The youngest, little Pete, 7 years old, always asks me to make little crocheted animals. Last week I finished a little yellow puppy for him. From where I'm sitting, I can see my little backyard through the window panes. I planted some rose bushes there that are so beautiful, and I have a tangerine tree that produces the sweetest fruit. When tangerine season comes, I make preserves and share them with the neighbors. It's a joy to see their happiness. I'm sitting here in my regular armchair, the one my oldest son gave me when he got married. It's dark brown, a bit faded now, but so comfortable I can't even explain. Next to me, I have my little table with the radio. I like to listen to old songs while I do crochet, and always a thermos with hot coffee. Before I continue, I wanted to make a special request to you who are listening. If you like my story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Grandparents' Tales. Okay? That way you help me reach more people who might need to hear what I have to share. And turn on the notification bell too, because every week I have a new story to share with you. And you, my dear ones who are watching me now, tell me here in the comments. From which little town are you watching me? And what time of day did you find this video? In the morning with coffee, after lunch, or already in the evening? I always read all the comments, and I'm so happy to know where you're from and when you take some time out of your day to listen to this grandma's stories. Tell me, will you? Let's create a chain of love. You know, my children, today I want to share with you a very difficult story from my life. It's about the day that should have been the happiest of my youth, my wedding day, but which turned into one of the worst experiences a woman can go through. It was the day I discovered that my own father was capable of selling me like I was an animal. For a long time, I kept this pain in my chest, didn't tell almost anyone. But now, at 73 years old, I feel it's time to speak. Maybe my story can help other women who went through similar situations or alert other families. Because unfortunately, what happened to me still happens out there. So get comfortable there, grab some coffee, and come with me on this journey. I'm going to tell everything from the beginning, from when I was a little girl in Boone, dreaming of love and never imagining that my own flesh and blood would be capable of betraying me in the worst possible way. Oh, my dear ones, when I close my eyes and think about my childhood in Boone, I can still smell the wood burning in my mother's wood stove, Geraldine. What a hard-working woman she was. She'd get up at 5 in the morning every day, light the fire, make coffee, and still take care of us 4 children with a patience I only came to understand when I became a mother too. Our house was tiny, wooden, with only 3 rooms. In the living room were 2 wicker chairs that my father, Anthony, had won in a bet, one of the few times he won anything betting. My parents' bedroom was separated from ours by a flowered curtain that Mama had sewn. I shared a bed with my younger sister, Darlene, who was 2 years younger than me. My brothers, Oscar and Arthur, slept on a mattress on the floor. The backyard was big, full of chickens running here and there. Mama raised about 20 chickens, and it was my job to collect the eggs every afternoon after school. We had a vegetable garden too, where she planted collards, lettuce, tomatoes, and always some corn stalks. It was a humble life, but in my childhood memory, it seemed like nothing essential was missing. My mother Geraldine was a saint. Thin, always in a dress and apron, hair pulled back in a simple bun. She worked washing clothes for others. The wealthier ladies of Boone would bring their fine clothes for her to wash and iron. I remember her standing at the wash tub, scrubbing clothes on the washboard, always humming a church song. She was very religious, took us to Mass every Sunday at Sacred Heart Church, which was downtown. Daddy Anthony was quite different. A tall, thin man, always with that unshaven beard, somewhat messy hair. He worked at Mr. Joaquin Ferreira's sawmill, but it wasn't steady work, you know. Sometimes he'd go weeks without working, and Mama would worry about the bills. I, small as I was, didn't fully understand, but I saw there was always a shortage of money at home. Daddy's problem was his addiction. Every Friday when he got his paycheck, he'd go straight to Joe's bar near the train station. He played cards, dominoes, bet on cockfights. When he came home, he'd usually already lost half the money. Mama never fought in front of us, but I'd hear the quiet arguments in their bedroom after we were already in bed. "Anthony, the children need new shoes," she'd whisper. "Woman, next time I'll win it all back. I'm sure I'm going to turn things around." He'd always reply the same thing. But that turnaround never came. On the contrary, things only got worse. I saw how he looked at me and my siblings sometimes, especially when someone came to the door asking for money. It was a strange look, like he was calculating something. At the time, I didn't understand, but today I know he saw us as a future investment. My games were simple, typical of a country child. Darlene and I played house under the tangerine tree in the back of the yard. We made little meals with mud and leaves, pretending we were great housewives. We had a rag doll that Mama made with scraps, named Rosie. She was our daughter in the games. At school, which was about 6 blocks from home, I was a good student. I really liked to read when I could borrow a book from the teacher, Miss Olinda. My favorite subject was English. I dreamed of being a teacher when I grew up, teaching other children to read and write. Mama always encouraged my studies, said that education was the only real inheritance she could leave me. My school friends were Zelda, the shoemaker's daughter, and little Gerald, son of Mrs. Conception, who sold pies at the farmer's market. The 3 of us were inseparable. After school, when I finished my chores at home, we'd play tag in the church square, or sit on the sidewalk talking, making up stories about the adults who passed by. Boone back then was a small town. Everyone knew everyone. Houses didn't have high walls like nowadays. Neighbors talked over wooden fences. Early in the morning, the baker would pass by on his bicycle shouting, "Fresh bread!" And in the afternoon, Mr. Manuel would come selling vegetables from a cart pulled by a gentle donkey. But even in this simplicity, I already noticed that my father was different from other fathers. My friends' fathers worked steadily, came home on time, played with their kids on Sundays. Daddy Anthony always seemed to be scheming something, always with that look of someone calculating the value of things, even of us, his own children. I remember once, I must have been about 8 years old, when a very well-dressed man came to the house, in a suit and tie. They talked quietly on the porch, and Daddy kept looking at me in a way that gave me chills. Later I found out the man wanted a girl to work at his house, take care of his young children. Daddy almost agreed to hand me over, but Mama got in the middle and said I was too young. "The girl needs to study, Anthony. She's not going to be anyone's maid," she said firmly. It was one of the few times I saw Mama directly confront Daddy. He got irritated, grumbled something about lost money, but didn't insist. At that moment, I didn't fully understand what was happening, but a little seed of fear was planted in my heart. It was as if I were merchandise that my father was evaluating, waiting for the best moment to sell. And as I grew up, this feeling only increased. Daddy started talking about my future in a way that made me uncomfortable. "This girl is going to bring a lot of money to the family," he'd tell his friends when they came to play cards at our house. "Look what a beautiful young lady she's becoming." That's how I lived my childhood in Boone, between my mother's protective love and the feeling that, in my father's eyes, I was just another way for him to get the money he always lost gambling. When I turned 16, my dear ones, it was as if I had blossomed overnight. Mama always said I took after her when she was young. Light brown hair, big eyes, a smile that lit up my face even on the hardest days. And it was precisely at this time that I met Joseph, the man who would completely change my life, although not in the way I imagined. I was coming back from Sunday Mass, walking down Flower Street with Darlene and Mama, when I saw a tall, dark-haired young man with jet-black hair combed with brilliantine talking to Mr. Manuel at the store entrance. He wore a well-pressed white shirt and dark pants, but you could tell they weren't expensive clothes. Still, he had an elegant way of carrying himself, you know? When our eyes met, I felt my heart race in a way I had never felt before. "Who is that young man there, Mr. Manuel?" I asked the storekeeper after Mama went inside to buy sugar. "Ah, that's Joseph Smith, girl. He arrived from Marion last week, working at Colonel Augustus's farm, out toward the highway. Hard-working young man, that one. Every day he stops here to buy bread for lunch." Joseph was 22 years old, worked from dawn to dusk in the fields, took care of cattle and helped with the corn crop. He was an orphan, raised by an aunt who died when he turned 18. That's why he'd left Marion, looking for a better life in Boone. He lived in a simple boarding house run by Mrs. Sebastian near the train station. For 3 weeks, I'd make up excuses to pass by Mr. Manuel's store at the time Joseph usually showed up. I'd pretend I needed to buy needles for Mama, or that I'd forgotten to get salt, anything. Until one day he greeted me. "Good morning, miss. You always pass by here at this time." I turned red as a beet, but managed to respond. "Good morning. It's that I help my mother with the household shopping." "What a hard-working family, then. My name is Joseph, Joseph Smith. And you, miss?" "Mary. Mary Reynolds." From that day on, we started talking whenever we met. He'd tell me about work on the farm, about how he dreamed of having his own piece of land someday. I'd talk about my studies, about my dream of being a teacher. Joseph listened to everything with attention, as if my words were the most important thing in the world. After 2 months of these casual meetings, he took courage. "Mary, I would very much like to ask your father's permission to court you. Of course, if you'd want that too." My heart jumped with joy, but soon came fear. "Joseph, my father is he's a difficult man. He doesn't like suitors hanging around the house. But I'm a hard-working, honest man. I don't have much money, but I have dignity. I'll talk to him with all respect." The following Friday, Joseph showed up at our house in the late afternoon. Daddy was sitting on the porch, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette after dinner. Mama called me inside the house, but I stayed listening to everything through the half-open window. "Good evening, Mr. Anthony. My name is Joseph Smith. I came here to ask permission to court your daughter, Mary." Daddy didn't even get up from his chair. He looked Joseph up and down with that look of disdain I knew well. "Oh, is that so? And what do you do for a living, boy?" "I work at Colonel Augustus's farm, sir. I take care of cattle, help with planting. It's honest work." "Employee work, right? A tall drink of water like you will never be able to properly support a family. My daughter deserves better than a poor nobody like you." Joseph swallowed hard, but maintained his respectful posture. "Sir, I know I'm not rich, but I'm a hard worker. I plan to prosper, have my own land, and I truly love your daughter." Daddy gave a dry, cruel laugh. "Love? What nonsense! Love doesn't fill bellies, boy. My daughter is beautiful. She can get a man with means, someone who's actually worth something. You're useless, a nobody. Get out of here and don't come back." I felt my heart breaking into pieces, seeing Joseph leave our house with his head down. I ran to my room and cried until I had no more tears. Mama came to comfort me, ran her hand through my hair like she did when I was little. "Daughter, your father is sometimes too harsh, but he wants what's best for you." "No, Mama. He doesn't want what's best for me. He wants whatever brings him the most money," I replied between sobs. During the following months, Joseph tried to meet me other times, always with great respect and distance. We'd talk briefly after Mass or when I went to get water at the public well. He told me he wouldn't give up on me, that he'd wait as long as necessary. And I fell more in love every day with that simple man with a pure heart. Daddy noticed we kept meeting and became furious. He started watching me, would send Darlene to accompany me everywhere. "This girl isn't going to ruin my plans because of some poor nobody," he'd grumble. What plans were those? At the time I didn't know, but today I understand that Daddy was already scheming something to use me as a bargaining chip. He had high gambling debts, people asking for money at our door almost every day, and I, at 17 years old, beautiful and innocent, was the only thing of value he had to offer. It was then that something happened that left me completely confused. One Saturday morning, Daddy came home with a strange smile on his face. He called Mama to talk in the kitchen, and soon after, she came to talk to me with her eyes shining with joy. "Mary, my daughter, your father changed his mind about Joseph. He said you two can date properly, and if it works out, even get married." I couldn't believe what I heard. "Mama, are you sure? Daddy really said that?" "He did. He said he thought it over, that Joseph seems to be a hard-working young man, and that you're both young. You can build a life together." I was euphoric, but also suspicious. I knew my father too well to believe in such a sudden change of heart. Something wasn't right. Daddy never did anything without self-interest, and this sudden generosity gave me a chill. But the joy of being able to officially date Joseph was stronger than any suspicion. That same afternoon, he came to our house and Daddy received him with a fake smile and honeyed words. "Joseph, my boy, I thought better about our conversation. You seem like a good young man, hard-working. You can date my Mary, yes." Joseph was surprised but happy. He shook Daddy's hand with gratitude. "Thank you very much, Mr. Anthony. I promise I'll take good care of Mary." "I'm sure you will," Daddy replied, with that smile I now know belonged to someone planning something terrible. For 3 months, Joseph and I dated officially. He'd come to the house on Sunday afternoons, sit with us on the porch, talk respectfully with Mama, and even with Daddy. We talked about marriage, dreamed about our life together. Joseph had gotten a promotion at the farm and was saving money to rent a simple little house for the two of us. But I noticed how Daddy looked at me during these visits. It was a calculating look, as if he were evaluating merchandise. And sometimes I'd see him talking quietly with strange men on the porch, always when Joseph wasn't around. Well-dressed men who arrived in carriages and spoke in whispers. What I didn't know, my dear ones, is that Daddy had already closed a much more lucrative deal for him than simply marrying off his daughter to a farm worker. He had sold me to the man who should have been the holiest in our town, Father Sylvester of Sacred Heart Parish. And my wedding day would be the day of delivery of the merchandise. March 15th, 1970, should have been the happiest day of my life, my dear ones. I had just turned 18, and I was finally going to marry Joseph. Mama had sewn my wedding dress with so much care. It was simple white fabric, but she embroidered small flowers on the hem and made delicate lace at the neckline. It wasn't a princess dress, but to me, it was the most beautiful in the world. I woke up at dawn that Saturday, with my heart beating hard from nerves and happiness. Mama was already awake too, making coffee and arranging the last details. Darlene, who was going to be my maid of honor, was as excited as I was. Even Daddy seemed to be in a good mood, whistling while he shaved in the backyard. "Today is your big day, my daughter," he told me at breakfast, with a smile that at the time I thought was affectionate. But today I know was the smile of someone about to complete a very lucrative deal. The ceremony was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the morning at Sacred Heart Church. Joseph had managed to save enough money to pay for the church wedding, and still have a little left over to start our life together. He had rented a small house on Commerce Street with 2 rooms and a little backyard where I could plant herbs. Around 8 o'clock, Mama's friends started arriving to help me get ready. Mrs. Kitty brought red lipstick that she said would enhance my lips, and Mrs. Eulalia lent me a necklace of tiny pearls she had received at her wedding. It was pure joy in our little house, everyone talking at once, giving me advice on how to be a good wife. When it was time to go to church, I looked beautiful. The dress fell perfectly on my body. My hair was pulled back in a low bun with some natural flowers that Darlene had picked in our yard. In the mirror, I saw a young woman in love, full of dreams and hopes. We walked to the church. It was tradition to go on foot, with all the family and neighbor ladies accompanying me, singing wedding songs. The neighborhood children ran alongside us, throwing flower petals. I felt like a queen. When we arrived at the church, my heart raced when I saw Joseph waiting for me at the altar. He looked handsome, in a borrowed but well-pressed suit, carefully combed hair, and that smile that made me fall in love every day. The guests, who weren't many, but were the people we loved, were all there, waiting for our ceremony. But it was at this moment that everything changed, my dear ones. It was at this moment that my life turned into a nightmare. Daddy grabbed my arm when I was about to start walking to the altar. "Wait a minute, Mary. Father Sylvester asked us to go to the church storage room before the ceremony. He needs to bless the rings and sign some papers away from the commotion. It'll just be a minute." I thought it was strange, but didn't question it. He was my father, and the priest was a respected authority. Why would I doubt? We went down a side corridor of the church to a heavy wooden door that led to the storage room where they kept the sacristy objects. "You go in first, girl. I'll call the priest," Daddy said, gently pushing me into the room. The storage room was a dark place, smelling of mold and dust. It had shelves full of old candlesticks, saint statues, stacked altar cloths. A small window let in only a thread of light. I stood there waiting, adjusting my dress so it wouldn't wrinkle. It was then that I heard the key turning in the lock from outside. "Daddy? Daddy, why did you lock the door?" I shouted, running to try to open it. But the door was locked from the outside, and no matter how much I knocked and called, no one answered. Minutes later, I heard the key turning again. My heart jumped. Finally, they were going to get me out of there. But when the door opened, who came in wasn't my father. It was Father Sylvester, except he wasn't wearing his usual cassock. He was in regular clothes, white shirt and dark pants, and had in his eyes something that made me tremble from head to toe. It wasn't the holy look of a priest. It was the look of a hungry wolf looking at a defenseless sheep. "Where are the rings, Father, and the papers?" I asked, trying to keep my voice firm, but my throat was as dry as paper. He locked the door again, this time from the inside, and put the key in his pocket. When he turned to me, he had a smile that made me nauseous. "There are no rings to bless, my dear. And the only paper that interests me is the receipt your father already signed." "Receipt? What receipt? I don't understand." "Of course you don't understand, poor thing. Your father didn't tell you that you were sold, that he received a very good amount to deliver the merchandise to me before she married that tall nobody out there?" The world spun around me. My legs went weak, and I had to lean against the wall so I wouldn't fall. "Sold? What are you talking about?" "Your father owed a lot of money to a lot of people, Mary, and I offered a solution. Pay all his debts in exchange for some special moments with the prettiest daughter in Boone. Before you dirty yourself with that poor nobody out there, You're going to be mine." At that moment, my dear ones, I understood the dimension of the betrayal. My own father had sold me like I was livestock. He had planned everything. The consent for the courtship, the wedding preparations. It was all just an act to deliver me to the buyer at the right time. "Please, Father, this can't be happening. You're a man of God." "God also created the pleasures of the flesh, my child. And I've been watching you grow up, become a woman. Today is my day to reap what I've planted." He started approaching, and I backed up until I was pressed against the back wall. The wedding dress that minutes before was my pride now seemed like a sacrificial garment. I was trapped, betrayed by my own blood, handed over as an offering to a monster disguised as a saint. "Don't scream," he said, getting closer. "Your father explained to everyone that the ceremony will take a little while. We have enough time to complete our business." That's when the worst moment of my life began, my dear ones. There, in that dark and dirty storage room, with the sound of the church organ beginning to play outside, that man tried to steal from me the purity I was saving for my husband. He tried to do things to me that a proper young lady didn't even know existed. I fought like a wild animal. I scratched, kicked, bit, screamed until my throat was raw. The wedding dress tore in the struggle. The flowers from my hair scattered across the dirty floor. He called me horrible names, said I was an offering that had already been paid for, that I had to accept my fate. But I didn't accept, no. Even though he was stronger, even though the situation seemed hopeless, something inside me refused to surrender. Maybe it was the love I felt for Joseph. Maybe it was the anger at my father's betrayal. But I fought with a strength I didn't know I had. And it was at this moment of total desperation, when I no longer had the strength to resist, that I heard a noise at the door. A noise of something hitting the wood very hard. Someone was trying to break down the storage room door. Someone had heard me scream. Someone was coming to save me. The sound at the door got louder, more desperate. It was as if someone were throwing themselves against the wood with their own body. Father Sylvester stopped what he was doing and looked at the door with anger and fear in his eyes. His hands trembled as he tried to compose himself, smooth his wrinkled clothes. "Who's there?" he shouted, trying to sound authoritative, but I heard the tremor in his voice. It was the voice of a man who knew he'd been discovered in the middle of his filth. "Mary! Mary! Are you in there?" It was Joseph's voice, hoarse with desperation and fury. "I know you're in there! I heard you screaming! I heard your voice!" My heart almost jumped out of my mouth when I heard my fiancé calling me. Hope returned like a light in the middle of darkness. I tried to respond, but my voice was weak, broken from so much screaming. "Joseph! Joseph! Get me out of here! He... The words refused to come out. How to explain what was happening in there? How to tell that my own father had sold me like a head of cattle? A terrible crash echoed through the storage room. Joseph had thrown himself against the door with a force I didn't know he had. The wood shook, creaked, but didn't give way completely. The priest went pale as a ghost, let me go and started fixing his clothes hurriedly, sweating cold. "You whore! You can't tell anyone anything," he hissed in my ear, trying to intimidate me one last time. "Your father already got the money. You've already been sold. This deal is done." But at that moment, my dear ones, something inside me broke for good. It wasn't just my father's betrayal. It wasn't just the violence I'd just suffered. It was the certainty that if I didn't do something right there in that instant, I would be lost forever. That disgusting man would keep using me whenever he wanted, and my father would keep selling me like cattle whenever he needed money for gambling. It was the terrible awareness that I wasn't a person in the eyes of my family's men. I was merchandise. An object of value that could be negotiated, sold, delivered to the highest bidder. And if I didn't fight there, at that moment, I would accept that fate for the rest of my life. It was the last straw. It was the moment I understood I had hit rock bottom and that either I climbed up or I drowned. Another crash. this time stronger, and I heard the wood crack and groan under the impact. Joseph was breaking down the door with brute force, moved by a love and fury that transformed my gentle fiancé into a savage warrior. "Get out of the way!" he bellowed with a voice I'd never heard before. It was the voice of a man maddened with rage. "Get out of the way, because I'm going to break down this door, even if I die trying." I could hear other voices from outside now. Our wedding guests were arriving, alerted by the noise. I heard my mother's voice shouting my name, heard Mr. Manuel saying something about calling the sheriff. On the third attempt, Joseph took more distance and threw himself against the door with all his body weight. The noise was like thunder. The upper hinge gave way completely, and the door burst open in an explosion of splintered wood. Joseph entered like a hurricane, with bloodshot eyes, his wedding suit all wrinkled and dirty, his hair disheveled. When he saw the scene, me on the dirty floor of the storage room, wedding dress torn, hair messed up, crying and trembling, and the priest trying to compose himself as if nothing had happened, his eyes turned red with pure hatred. "You bastard! You damned son of a bitch!" Joseph threw himself on Father Sylvester with a violence I had never seen before. "What did you do to her? What did you do to my bride?" The fight was terrible, my dear ones. The man my father called Tall Nobody, Poor Nobody, and Weakling was beating the town priest with punches so hard that I could hear the dry sound of fists hitting that monster's face. The priest tried to defend himself, screamed that he was religious authority, that he would excommunicate everyone, that this was sacrilege, but Joseph was possessed with holy fury. "Authority nothing! You're a demon, a child abuser!" Joseph shouted between the punches he distributed. "How dare you touch my Mary? How dare you abuse an innocent bride on her wedding day?" The priest tried to fight back once, but Joseph was much stronger and was driven by a rage that gave him the strength of 10 men. Each punch was a declaration of love. Each blow was a promise that no one would hurt me again while he was alive. It was then that other people arrived. The noise of the door being broken down and the fight had caught the attention of half the world, and our wedding guests came running down the church corridor. My mother was the first to enter, and when she saw me in that state, sitting on the dirty floor, dress torn, crying convulsively, she fell to her knees crying as if someone had killed her child. "My daughter, my dear little daughter, what did they do to you? What evil is this?" Soon after came Sheriff John Baptist, who had been at Mass waiting for the ceremony to begin, and some other important people from town, Dr. Aristotle, the pharmacist Mr. Valdesir, the teacher Miss Kitty. When they saw the scene, they understood everything immediately. It wasn't hard to deduce what had happened there in that storage room. The priest was arrested in the act, still bleeding from the punches Joseph had given him, the cassock he had hastily put on all dirty with blood and dust. When he tried to deny it, make up some excuse, say it was all just a misunderstanding, I found strength I didn't know I had, and spoke the truth in front of everyone, with a voice that came from deep in my soul. My father sold me to him. My own father received money and delivered me as if I were a cow in the corral. He said he'd already received payment. The silence that fell at that moment was sepulchral. Everyone looked around looking for my father, but he had disappeared like smoke. He had taken the dirty money and fled like the coward he always was, leaving behind the family and daughter he had just sacrificed on the altar of greed. In the days that followed, my dear ones, I entered a state I don't even know how to describe. It was as if my soul had left my body and was floating on the ceiling, watching myself from above, trying to understand how my life had turned into that hell in a matter of minutes. Joseph tried to comfort me, sat by my side in bed for hours, held my hand, whispered words of affection. Mama didn't leave my side, brought chamomile tea, tried to get me to eat something, combed my hair carefully. But I was like a ghost walking through the house. I couldn't eat. Food tasted like cardboard. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that disgusting man's face. I couldn't even cry properly. It was as if I had lost the ability to feel anything. Worst of all was the shame I carried like a weight on my chest. In small towns like Boone, everyone finds out about everything very quickly. And even knowing I was the victim, I felt as if I had a red mark on my forehead, as if everyone who passed me on the street was thinking about what had happened to me, imagining details, making judgments. Some neighbor ladies would come to the house pretending concern, but I saw in their eyes that morbid curiosity, that desire to know more details of my disgrace so they could comment later in their circle of friends. It was a second violence, more subtle, but equally painful. Sheriff John Baptist was very respectful to me during my statement. He explained that the priest would be tried and probably convicted, that the crime had happened in front of witnesses, and that justice would be done. But that it would take time, months, maybe years. And meanwhile, I would have to live with the looks, with the whispers, with the malicious comments from some people. It was at this time that I tried to make my first, more formal complaint. I went to the house of the town judge, Dr. Aristotle, to tell the whole truth about the sale my father had made. I wanted justice not only against the priest, but against my own father, who had treated me like merchandise. I wanted him to be prosecuted, arrested, to pay for what he did. But when I arrived at the doctor's house, I discovered something that left me even more desperate. He was my father's buddy. He had baptized Darlene when she was a baby. He was a regular at Joe's bar, where Daddy used to play cards and bet on dominoes. "Look, Mary," he said, with a condescending tone that made me nauseous, shuffling some papers on the desk without even really looking at me. "I understand your anger, but your father has already fled the city. Nobody knows where he is. There's no point in stirring up this sad story. The priest has already been arrested. He's already paying for what he did. Now it's better for you to forget this nonsense and try to move on with your life." "Forget?" I replied, feeling a revolt rise up my throat like bitter bile. "How am I going to forget that my own father sold me, that he handed me over to be violated on my wedding day? Girl, these things happen in poor families. The important thing is that you didn't lose that you can still marry Joseph properly. Forget this idea of pursuing your father. It'll only bring more shame to your family, more malicious comments in town." I left the judge's house feeling dirtier and more humiliated than when I left the church storage room. It was as if the entire world of powerful men had united to silence me, to make me swallow the humiliation and move forward as if nothing had happened, as if I didn't even have the right to anger, to justice, to indignation. That night, lying in my bed, looking at the dark ceiling while listening to my mother whisper prayers in the next room, I felt I had reached my lowest point. It was as if I were at the bottom of an immense well, with no rope to climb up, no light to guide me, no hope of seeing the sun again. It was then that I had a dream, my dear ones. A dream that changed everything, that gave me back hope when I no longer believed in anything. I dreamed of my grandmother Odette, who had died when I was 8 years old. She appeared to me dressed in white, with that sweet smile and those clear eyes I remembered from childhood, when she'd hold me and tell stories of warrior princesses. "Mary, my dear granddaughter," she said with that gentle voice that used to calm me when I was little, "you're not going to let yourself be defeated by these evil men. You have warrior blood in your veins. Your great-grandmother faced gunslingers and colonels, your grandmother faced poverty and disease, and you're going to face this situation too. But not alone, my child. Never alone. Grandma, I don't know what to do anymore. Everyone abandons me. Everyone betrays me. Look for Sister Leopoldine at St. Joseph's Church. She arrived in town recently from the state capital. She's a true woman of God who fights for the weak and oppressed. She'll help you find the path to justice." I woke up with my heart beating hard and a clarity in my mind I hadn't felt in days. Sister Leopoldine. She was a nun who had arrived in town recently from Raleigh. Everyone commented that she was different from the other religious women, that she defended the poor and oppressed, that she wasn't afraid to confront the powerful when it came to protecting the defenseless. There, at that moment, my secret plan was born. I was going to look for Sister Leopoldine and tell her everything, not only what had happened to me, but the entire network of corruption and complicity that allowed men like my father to sell their daughters and men like the priest to abuse families' trust. It was my only hope. It was my last thread of light in that total darkness that had become my life. The next day, I would wait for Joseph to leave for work, tell Mama I was going shopping downtown, and go to St. Joseph's Church to look for my salvation. I was going to bet all my chips on this woman of faith who might be the only person in town capable of helping me find a way back to dignity. The morning after my dream about Grandma Odette, I woke up for the first time in weeks with a little bit of determination in my chest, my dear ones. It was as if a small flame had lit inside me after so much time in the dark. Joseph had left early for work at the farm. He now worked double shifts trying to save money and get me out of Boone soon, away from the looks and comments of the town. "Mama, I'm going for a little walk downtown to clear my head," I told Geraldine, who was hanging clothes in the yard. "Maybe I'll stop by Mr. Valdecier's pharmacy, buy some medicine for my headache." She looked at me with those tired eyes, still swollen from crying so much for me. "Go carefully, my daughter. And don't take too long, okay?" I walked through the streets of Boone, feeling the looks following me, some of pity, others of curiosity. But this time, instead of shrinking with shame, I kept my head up. I had a mission, a purpose. I was going to look for my salvation. St. Joseph's Church was on the other side of town, on a quieter little street, away from the downtown bustle. It was smaller than Sacred Heart Church, simpler, but had a different peace about it. When I pushed open the heavy wooden door, the silence enveloped me like a hug. Sister Leopoldine was kneeling in front of the altar, praying. She was a woman of about 40 years old, taller than the other nuns I knew, with a serene but firm face. When she saw me enter, she got up and came to meet me with a welcoming smile. "Good morning, my child. I'm Sister Leopoldine. You're not Mary Reynolds?" My heart raced. She knew who I was, knew my story. "You know what happened to me?" "I do, dear. And I also know you're suffering a lot. Come, let's sit there on the bench and talk calmly." We sat together on the wooden bench in the first row, and for the first time since my wedding day, I felt safe to speak. I told her everything: my father's sale, the priest's abuse, Daddy's escape with the money, the humiliation at the judge's house, everything. I spoke between tears I could no longer hold back. She listened to me in silence, holding my hand, and when I finished, her eyes shone with holy indignation. "Mary, what happened to you is a terrible crime, and it cannot go unpunished. I came from Raleigh precisely to help women like you, who suffer at the hands of powerful men who think they can do whatever they want. But sister, the town judge is my father's buddy. The sheriff is even a good person, but he can only arrest who's here, and my father disappeared into the world. My child, there's a higher instance than this little town's justice. I have contacts in the capital. I know prosecutors and judges who aren't involved in this web of cronyism and corruption. We're going to file a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office." My heart leapt with hope, but soon came fear. "Do you think they'll listen to me? I'm just a poor girl from the countryside." "Dear, I've been working for 15 years defending women's rights. I have a network of contacts that includes lawyers, social workers, other nuns. You're not alone. We'll go to Raleigh together, and I guarantee your voice will be heard." In the following days, Sister Leopoldine worked like a warrior preparing my case. She collected statements from witnesses, people who had seen strange men visiting my house, neighbors who had heard arguments about money, even Mr. Manuel from the store, who confirmed seeing my father celebrating after receiving a large amount of unknown origin. "What your father did has a name in law: human trafficking," she explained to me while we organized documents on a church table. "And the priest committed not only attempted rape, but also conspiracy for sexual exploitation. These are federal crimes." 2 weeks later, We were on the train to Raleigh. It was the first time I'd left Boone, and as sad as the situation was, I felt a strange freedom watching the landscape pass by the train car window. It was as if each mile distanced me not only from my town, but from the version of me that had been sold like cattle. In the capital, Sister Leopoldine first took me to her friend's house, Dr. Ivonette Macedo, a lawyer who specialized in cases of violence against women. She was an elegant woman, about 50 years old, who received me with a maternal affection that made me cry with gratitude. "Mary, dear, what happened to you is revolting, but unfortunately it's not rare," she told me, serving hot tea in a delicate porcelain cup. "I know dozens of similar cases. Fathers who sell daughters to settle debts, religious authorities who abuse families' trust. The difference is that now we have legal instruments to fight this." The next day, we went to the public prosecutor's office. Prosecutor Dr. Gumersindo Silva received me with seriousness and respect, listened to my whole story without interrupting me, made detailed notes. When I finished, he pounded his fist on the desk hard. "This is inadmissible. We're going to open a public civil inquiry and request search and seizure of your father's entire contact network. If he's a fugitive, we'll issue a national arrest warrant. And as for the priest, we're going to request transfer of the case to the Capital District, where there's no local influence." For the first time in months, I felt that justice could actually exist. It was no longer an empty word. It was real people, really working to help me. But Sister Leopoldine didn't stop there. She took me to a support house for women victims of violence, where I met other young women who had been through situations similar to mine. It was at the same time sad and liberating to know I wasn't alone, that my pain wasn't unique. "Mary," said one of them, Zelda, a young woman from Charlotte who had been sold by her stepfather. "At first we think it's our fault, that we really are merchandise. But here we learn we're people, that we have rights." During the 3 days I spent in Raleigh, my world opened up. I met strong women, lawyers, social workers, other nuns who dedicated their lives to helping victims like me. Sister Leopoldine introduced me to a psychologist, Dr. Hortensia, who explained that the trauma I carried had treatment, that it was possible to heal the wounds of the soul. "You're going to need time and patience with yourself," she told me during our conversation, "but with adequate support, you can rebuild your life and be happy." On the last day, before we returned to Boone, I received news that changed everything. Dr. Gumersindo had managed to track down my father. He was in Charlotte, working at the port docks, thinking he was safe, far from Boone's justice. "Tomorrow the arrest warrant goes out," the prosecutor informed me. "Your father will answer to justice for what he did. And more, we managed to freeze a bank account where he deposited part of the money he received. That money will be returned to you as compensation." When the train arrived back in Boone, I was no longer the same Mary who had left there 3 days before. I had my head held high, my heart full of hope, and for the first time since my wedding day, I believed in a different future. Joseph was waiting for me at the station, anxious and worried. When he saw me get off the train with Sister Leopoldine, he ran to meet me. "Mary, how are you? What happened in the capital?" I held his hands and looked into his eyes with new firmness. "Joseph, my love, real justice exists. And we're going to start our new life away from here, away from these rotten men, in a city where no one will judge us for what happened." "Are you sure about this?" "I am. And more than that, my father will pay for what he did. Justice will be done." It was true. 15 days later, we received the news. Anthony Reynolds had been arrested in Charlotte and would be tried for the crimes of human trafficking and conspiracy. Father Sylvester would also be tried in the Capital District, far from Boone's cronyism. For the first time since that terrible day at church, I smiled for real. The girl who had been sold like cattle was dead. In her place, a woman was born who knew how to fight for her rights, who had found her voice and her strength. And all of this thanks to a courageous nun who taught me that even in the darkest moments, there's always a light waiting to be found. There's always someone willing to extend a hand to those who need it. And here I am today, my dear ones, at 73 years old, sitting in my armchair in Asheville, telling this story I kept in my chest for so many years. I look around and see a life I never imagined possible in those dark days in Boone. After we returned from the capital and justice began to be served, Joseph and I decided to start our life away from all that. With the money from the compensation we managed to recover from my father, plus the savings Joseph had accumulated, we bought 2 bus tickets and came to Asheville in December 1970. It was a bigger city than Boone, where nobody knew our story, where we could just be Joseph and Mary, a young couple in search of a new beginning. Joseph got a job on a farm here in the outskirts, and I started working as a seamstress, making clothes for others. We rented a simple little house in the Santa Helena neighborhood, tiny but ours. That's where our first son was born in 1972, little Oscar, today a 53-year-old man who works as a mechanic and lives nearby with his family. 2 years later came Conception, my only daughter, who today is a teacher at the municipal school. And in 1977, the youngest was born, my Arthur, who followed in his father's footsteps and works in farming. All 3 gave me wonderful grandchildren. There are 7 in all, between 7 and 25 years old. Little Pete, who I mentioned at the beginning, is Conception's son. That boy is the light of my life. Every weekend he comes to sleep over here, and we do crochet together. He makes some crooked little squares, but with so much affection that I keep them all in a special box. Joseph passed away 3 years ago, my dear ones. He was a good man until the last day, loved and respected me for all those 50 years of marriage we had. Never, not even once, did he charge me or make me feel less of a woman because of what I went through. On the contrary, he always said I was the bravest woman he knew, that I had become stronger after everything. Mary, he used to say, holding my hand, you turned pain into strength. That's why our children grew up knowing how to defend themselves, knowing what's right and wrong. And it's true. I raised my children telling the truth about life, teaching that women aren't the property of any man, that a family worth its salt protects the weakest instead of selling them. Conception grew up knowing she had a voice and rights, and today she teaches that to her students. My boys learn to respect women, to protect those who need it. Today my routine is simple and happy. I wake up early, make my very strong black coffee, sit here in the armchair and start the day's crochet, listening to the news on the radio. In the morning, I take care of the yard plants. These rose bushes you should be seeing through the window, I planted with my own hands 15 years ago. The tangerine tree bears fruit every year, and I make preserves to distribute to the neighbors. 3 times a week, Teresa, my daughter-in-law, comes to my house and we do crochet together. She was the one who taught me, as I told you at the beginning. Today, I've already taught several women here in the neighborhood. We get together on Thursday afternoons at Mrs. Normelia's house and stay there talking and doing our work. It's quite a therapy. I sell my blankets and tablecloths at the little market in the central square every Saturday. It's not a lot of money, but it's mine, earned with my own work. With this small income, I buy my materials and still have some change left over to buy presents for my grandchildren on their birthdays. Sunday is family day. My children and grandchildren come to have lunch here at home. I make spaghetti with homemade sauce, sausage stuffing, garden salad. The table gets full, noisy, happy. The older grandchildren help serve, the little ones run around the yard. It's in these moments that I feel my heart overflow with gratitude. Sometimes when I'm alone here at night doing crochet, I think about everything I went through. I remember the 18-year-old girl who was betrayed by her own father, who was almost destroyed by men's evil. And then I look around, this house that's mine, this family I built, this peace I conquered, and I give thanks. I give thanks for Sister Leopoldine, who saved me when I needed it most. I give thanks for Joseph, who truly loved me. I give thanks for my children, who gave me the joy of being a mother and grandmother. I even give thanks for the pain I went through because it taught me to value every moment of happiness. My father died in prison in 1985, never having asked for forgiveness. The priest served 15 years in prison and then was expelled from the church. Justice was done, as Sister Leopoldine had promised. I don't feel anger toward them anymore. I feel pity. Pity for men who wasted their lives doing evil while I used mine to build good. Today, when some neighbor lady comes to my house crying because her husband beats her, or when a mother comes to me worried about her teenage daughter, I listen, welcome, guide. I teach that there's always a way out. There's always someone willing to help. I tell my story when I need to show that it's possible to start over. That's how I live my 73 years here in Asheville, in peace, in gratitude, surrounded by true love. Life taught me that the size of the darkness we face doesn't matter. There's always a light waiting to be found. There's always a chance to start over. And if you who are listening to me have gone through, or know someone who went through something similar, remember, you are much stronger than you imagine, and you are never, never alone. My dear ones, coming to the end of my story, I want to leave a message for you who might be going through similar situations or know someone who is suffering. First, never accept being treated like merchandise. It doesn't matter if it's father, husband, stepfather, or any man, nobody has the right to sell, hurt, or abuse you. You are people, you have dignity, you have rights that nobody can take away. Second, there's always a way out, even when it seems there isn't. I thought I was going to die in that storage room, that I would never get justice. But Sister Leopoldine appeared. Good people willing to help appeared. In any country, anywhere in the world, there are authorities and organizations ready to protect those who need it. Seek help. Don't stay silent. I learned firsthand that pain can become strength. That betrayal can teach us to value those who are loyal. That fear can transform into courage when we decide not to accept the unacceptable anymore. That a girl sold like cattle can become a free woman, loving mother, and happy grandmother. I learned that a real family protects, doesn't sell. That true love respects, doesn't hurt. That justice takes time, but always comes for those who don't give up fighting. And I learned that God never abandons those who suffer. He sends angels like Sister Leopoldine at the right time. If you know any woman being sold, abused, or mistreated, don't just watch. Extend your hand. Be the light she needs to get out of the darkness. Human dignity has no nationality. It's a universal value that we all must defend. For you who are parents, protect your children as the most precious thing you have. Never, under any circumstances, use them to solve money problems or addictions. Children aren't investments. They're human beings who deserve love, care, and protection. And for you, my daughters and sons who are listening to me and went through similar traumas, look at me today. I'm 73 years old. I have a beautiful family, a life in peace. What happened to me didn't define me. I defined myself by how I reacted to it. You too can rebuild your lives, can be happy, can find people who truly love you. Life taught me that we are much stronger than we imagine, that after the storm always comes the calm, that all darkness has an end, and a new day always dawns. My dear ones who followed my story to the end, you gave me an enormous gift by listening to this grandma. If the story touched your heart, I ask, subscribe to Grandparents' Tales and turn on the notification bell right now. It's important that more people hear these stories so that situations like this don't repeat themselves. Share with those you think need to hear it. And leave here in the comments just the word justice. That way I know you stayed until the end and understood the message. Do it now. Don't wait another minute. Let's spread this chain of awareness and protection for our women. May God bless each one of you, and remember, there's always hope. There's always a new beginning. There's always love waiting for you. A kiss on each of your hearts.